All right, here we go again. This is probably going to be another long one because Ben, aka Richter IAG, asked me again to do a video and to give my feedback on a certain YouTube video from Gracie Breakdown from Rener and Hit on Gracie, where they answer the question, what exactly is a Jiu-Jitsu blue belt? Now, I keep looking over here because it's on my TV screen. Richter IAG, Richter Ben, he said, just turn on OBS and do some kind of a reaction video. I don't know how to do that. I'm old school. I have OBS only because my QuickTime stopped working. So I'm kind of old school. I'm kind of technologically slow. When you got kids that are in their 20s like I do, maybe your technology skills start to fall off. I don't even use, like, my kids like, get on, what do you call it? Discord. I don't have Discord. So whatever. Moving on. I'm going to watch this video. I'm going to react right here. I'm not going to put the video on my screen because I do not want to get demonetized or copyright stricken or whatever. And I'm going to react to what I see here in the video. Now, the truth is, I've seen this video before. I have watched it in the past, according to my YouTube. It says I watched it in the past, and it looks familiar. So before I press play, let me just say my first impression is these guys look young. Okay, they look very young. Now, I don't know how old Rener Gracie is or Hit on Gracie is. I saw Hit on the other day when I went to tour Gracie Torrance, and he looks great. The guy's in great shape. He looks like $1 million. So I'm not saying he looks old or that he looks, out of shape or anything crazy like that. Don't start any drama. But just looking at this picture, my man's got a lot more hair, and they both look pretty darn young. So, I mean, hell, you look at a video of me from 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I'm going to look a heck of a lot different too. So yeah, these guys look really young, and they're going to talk about their blue belts and what exactly is a blue belt. And I wonder if this is back in the day when they had the technical blue belt where you could get a blue belt online. This is I'm thinking this is probably pre-combatives belt. I'm not sure. But my man Ben asked me to watch it, and I got the day off. Again, with these crazy fires going on in Southern California, I'm a high school teacher. My school district closed down school because of the fires and the smoke. So I'm going to watch it. I'm going to let it run, and I'll probably chop it and edit it as we go. But I'm about to press play. So if you want to follow along, I'll put a little timestamp on the video so you know exactly where I am. So if you want to follow along, you're going to press play right about now. All right, I paused the video at 2 minutes and 11 seconds. And the reason why I paused it is because, yes, indeed, I have seen this video before. And yes, they started out talking about what percentage of people have tried Jiu-Jitsu. And it's not a big number. I think Rener said 7 million people out of the billions of people on the planet. What percentage have tried Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? He says 7 million people. And out of that 7 million people, I think he's about to say that only 10% ever make it to blue belt, which is freaking sad. If you think about any other activity, any other sport, if you said, hey, how many people that start piano lessons actually learn to play piano? Okay, I don't know. Hopefully more than 10%. Taekwondo, karate, you just compare it to other martial arts, and I recognize that karate gets a bad rap and Taekwondo gets kind of a bad rap because there's a bunch of 13-year-old, 10-year-old, 8-year-old black belts. I understand it's a different vibe, different feel, different kind of a comparison. However, I think it is a bad omen. It's a bad testament to jiu-jitsu that out of the 7 million people who started, only 10% actually get to the next level. And I have seen this before, and I have talked about this before with my students. The reason why I talked about it with my students is because I told them they don't want to, my lesson was, you guys don't want to work through the process. Everybody wants to be a black belt, but nobody wants to start at white belt, okay? That's kind of the lesson I gave my students. Everybody wants to be rich and famous. You ask my students, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are your goals? They all want to be rich. They want to be rich. They want to have a mansion, and they want to drive a Hellcat. All the boys want to drive a Hellcat. I don't know why, but they want a Hellcat. And I said, okay, how are you going to get there? And they don't know how. They're kind of lost. They just go, well, I can be an influencer. Okay, how many followers you got? 18? Like, all right, well, you ain't gonna get there, I want to be a professional football player. Okay, how hard are you training? How hard are you working? How hard are you grinding? Because a lot of these people want the results without the grind. And I don't know what Rener's going to say next or what Hiron's going to say next. I'm pretty sure I've seen this video before, but they're saying that it's difficult to get to the blue belt. It's difficult to get to that standpoint. But they started by saying that the hardest belt to get is the white belt. The hardest thing to do is to get started, which I heard something similar. I saw a video on Instagram. I think it was a wrestling coach, and he said the heaviest weight in the gym is the door, which is a phenomenal way of saying just getting there is the hardest part. And that's true for a lot of people. It's definitely true for Ben, Richter, IAG. It was definitely true for me when I was at Keep Showing Up University, because when you don't feel motivated, when you don't feel rewarded, when you don't feel like you're making progress, when you feel frustrated, disgruntled, you're afraid of possibly being hurt, you're afraid of possibly being embarrassed, it's hard to show up for that. You're showing up to get beat on, to possibly get hurt, and to be frustrated. That takes a certain unique individual to show up, to keep showing up when you're going to get hurt, possibly injured, possibly frustrated, possibly embarrassed. So that's a tough thing to do. But I'll let the boys, I'm calling them boys, they're grown-ass men, but I'm going to let the fellas keep talking about what exactly is a Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. So picking it back up at 2 minutes and 11 seconds. All right, we're at 4 minutes and 12 seconds, and they just talked about the early days of Gracie Academy, how they had typical training with sparring and rolling, and you had survival of the fittest, where the savage, the warrior guy, would beat up on the other guys, and eventually the other guys would quit. Now, let me be perfectly honest. I have two reactions to that statement. My first reaction is, oh, that's a darn shame. All these white belts showed up and wanted to learn, and they got kicked out, or they got frustrated and they left because the savage beast warrior guy was beating up on them, and it was survival of the fittest. That is sad. That's reaction number one. Reaction number two is, ha 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 ha, you weren't tough enough, strong enough, badass enough to make it, so get out of here, you little weaklings, right? That's the negative, the devil on my shoulder talking, because I've always wanted to be a savage. I've always wanted to be a warrior. I always wanted to be a badass. I'm telling you, there is no better feeling in the world than getting into the ring and facing off against someone your size, or in my case, oftentimes bigger, which is strange because I'm pretty big, and fighting that guy and beating that guy. I can tell you there was one time in particular, the only time I fought in front of a really big crowd in boxing, where I knocked this dude out, and it was an amazing feeling to feel like king of the world. I knocked this dude out. I won the fight. The crowd is cheering. Yes. It's like this whole gladiator warrior mindset feeling, which is like, I think, deeply ingrained in all of us. I think we all want to be a badass. I think we all want to win, and we all want to feel like a warrior, but the process of getting there is challenging. I used to say this a lot. This is a whole, Ben, be careful what you wish for, bro, because I'm on a tangent. But I used to say there's a lion in all of us. I used to call my boxing thing, I call it Lionheart Boxing. And I said, there's a lion in all of us, and I'm going to help you find it. That was my little motto back in the day. There's a lion in all of us. And I do believe that. I believe there's a warrior, gladiator, badass in all of us. Some of us, it takes a little more work to uncover it. Some of us, it takes a little more work to discover it. Some of us, it takes a little more work to get in touch with it. And so there's a part of me who's like, yeah, the lion was doing what lions do. Other part of me is like, yeah, but what about all the other people who hadn't found their lion yet? What about all the other people who didn't get there yet? And trust me, I've trained hundreds of kids, maybe thousands of kids in Taekwondo, and it's an amazing feeling to see the uncoordinated kid who stuck with it finally click. You know, you get that light bulb moment where everything comes together, and now they're competitive. Not just competitive, sometimes they're beating up on the guys who used to give them the blues. That's an amazing feeling too. And so there's something to be said for patience. There's something to be said for having a process and a system, which of course I know the Gracies have a process and a system, but just hearing the old way they used to do it, it's kind of cool and very sad all at the same time. It's like, yeah, you want to do this? You want to be a badass? You got to be tough. You want to be a Gracie University black belt? You got to survive. You got to put in the work. You got to grind. Yeah, what's up? But that really cuts out a large portion of the population of people who might learn differently or people who might take a little bit longer. And I think that's why the Gracies shifted gears. But we'll find out more about that here in just a moment when I press play. So yes, he said it's 100 times harder. I took notes. I'm a teacher, right? I take notes. It's 100 times harder to earn the white belt than it is to earn the blue belt, because getting in off the street is much, much harder than continuing once you're already there. But well, you know what? I won't speculate or guess what they're going to say next. I'll just press play and listen and hear it for myself. So here we go. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Let's see what they say. Okay, that didn't take very long, but I'm at 4 minutes and 39 seconds where the gentlemen, the fellas, they said that when they were teaching back in 2002 at the old academy, their class sizes were like 12 or 15 people and they weren't growing. If there's one thing you can say about Gracie University, you can never say that they don't grow, that they're not about that business. They don't have a lot of students, because they do. And so to hear that their class size at one point was 15 people is kind of interesting, kind of disappointing. Honestly, it's like, dang, guys, what were you doing back then? Well, clearly they're about to tell us where they went wrong and then how they did it right. They're going to jump on board and go, hooray, they figured it out. It's going to be great, right? But the thing that really got me, or that made me pause the video, was if you look at your typical Keep Showing Up University, how many students do they have? Are they growing? Do they have a lot of people and they're, moving and adding locations and larger businesses and larger studios and whatever? Is the growth there? Because my experience to Keep Showing Up University is they are the same damn size, or probably smaller than they were 3 years ago when I first started there. My experience to Keep Showing Up University, they are exactly the same. As a matter of fact, I got a text message from Business Guy the other day, and Business Guy was saying, "Hey, I saw you're back to training. Congratulations." And I'm like, yeah, it's great. And he goes, "Yeah, we're going to be revamping some things because we're going to make things better." And I'm like, I hope it works out. Good luck with that. Not mad, not hating. We're still cool. Like I said, I love those guys. But recognizing that the average Gracie University CTC has more students than Keep Showing Up University. Recognizing the average Gracie University CTC has a bigger or nicer building than most of the Keep Showing Up universities in the world. Recognizing that the average Gracie University CTC has more kids and more adults and more women and more people just in general training. And they usually have a smile on their face when they're coming in, and they have a smile on their face when they're leaving. Yes. Now, I love my guys that Keep Showing Up University. We would hang out afterward and talk trash and, hang out and just shoot the breeze, whatever. Great time, great group of friends. I love those guys. I will love them until I die. But I didn't walk in there with a smile on my face. I walked in there like, all right, I hope it's something I can do. All right, I hope the warm-up's not crazy today, because that warm-up sometimes would kick my butt. God forbid a new student showed up and Keep Showing Up University. It's like they had to do an intense warm-up so the new student realized we were a bunch of badass gladiators, right? So if there was a new student that showed up, it was like, all right, now we're going to do the warm-up. The warm-up would be 30 minutes long. And then it would be like, okay, now it's trap and roll. Because they would, hold on, my son's calling me. Back to recording, because I will always answer the phone for my kids. I don't care what's going on. Where was I? Oh, yeah. You'd walk in there. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, of course. Whenever there's a new student, we have the super intense warm-up, and then we did the trap and roll. Pretty much every time. The UPA, whatever you want to call it. Every time there was a new student, the whole class and everything we'd been learning would almost come to a grinding halt while they catered to that new student. Everything would slow down and come to a grinding halt where they would make sure that new student was, first of all, knew we were tough and warriors and had a great workout, and taught them something valuable that they would like and appreciate and remember, which was the trap and roll, aka the UPA. And so it was interesting to me that every single time a new person showed up, we would go back to like Jiu-Jitsu 101, and then they come to a second class, and by third class it's like, all right, get in where you fit in. You know what I mean? And so again, it's interesting to me that when you go to Gracie University, people have a smile on their face. They don't seem worried. They don't seem anxious. They don't seem pressured. They don't seem fearful. And they're growing. And they're big. And they're nice. And they're heavily populated. So it sounds like the Gracies must be doing something right. But if you jump on Reddit, you know what you're going to see? You're going to see a bunch of haters talking about how it's weak and how they're soft and how they're not good and how they're not good fighters and they don't win any competitions and blah, 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 blah. And that's that whole savage survivor, warrior of the fittest mentality versus student of the game mentality. Do you want to be a badass who endures, or do you want to be an expert who excels? Damn, that's pretty good. I'm going to say that again. Do you want to be a badass who learns by enduring, or do you want to be an expert who learns and excels? I like that. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'm at 6 minutes and 26 seconds, and I just paused it because the gentleman Hiron and Henner, they said they changed 3 things. The curriculum, they changed the sparring rules, they changed the blue belt test, which I guess now would be the combatives test. They went from 250 to 300 students to over 650 plus students in 18 months, and they said the growth keeps going from there. Now, let me make a confession. I saw this video years ago, probably when I first looked into Gracie University. I thought, yeah, you're teaching people online. That's a scam. I genuinely believed that. Henner can rip up my membership if he wants. I thought teaching people online, back then when I saw it, I thought teaching people online is kind of a scam. Now, having watched the videos, having actually taken the classes, seeing how they teach and how they broke it all down, I'm like, if you had a partner, I still don't think it's feasible to learn jiu-jitsu by yourself. But if you had a willing partner, me and my son's 23 years old, about to be 23 years old, and you guys rolled in the garage with these videos, you can learn the techniques. Would you know it as well as going to a CTC? Probably not. Would you know it as well as having an instructor teaching you the moves and watching you and correcting your mistakes? Probably not. But if you drilled it enough, if you watched it enough and did it enough, I think you'd be pretty darn good. And as a matter of fact, I've seen other videos where Rener has tested and rolled with blue belts or whatever students who are strictly online students, and they do pretty darn good. And so when I first watched this, I think I was hating, and I was like, yeah, that's bogus, that's BS. But now having seen it, I'm like, okay, it's possible, sure. But they haven't really got to the online stuff yet. They're just talking about the growth of their academy from 300 to 650 in like 18 months. And that's pretty freaking awesome. So good job, guys. Let's learn more about this curriculum, these sparring rules, and the blue belt test, which you already know what's coming. We know what's happening. The curriculum, probably with the cards, so you can check in and get your attendance, get your little dopamine hit, right? Also, the sparring, no survival of the fittest until you prove you know what you're doing. So it creates and provides, that was me trying to combine create and provide, creates and provides a safe atmosphere in which to learn. So I think that's a good idea. And then the blue belt test, which is called the combatives test, that kind of makes sense too, but I will not go ahead. I will not guess. I will not try to jump ahead, but I will hit the play button and see what the fellas have to say next. Here we go. All right, real quick, I paused it at 7:31. The fellas just talked about the analogy, the illustration. If you went to a university and they didn't tell you what you needed to do to get your degree, you'd get frustrated and you'd quit. I guess this is where I got that, because I've used that analogy before. I've used that analogy here on my channel. I use that analogy with my man Travis on the Elbows Tight podcast. I've used that analogy multiple places because I'm a product of the American education system. I work in the American education system. If I don't tell you what you need to know, if I can't set the expectation with the syllabus, I can't tell you the major projects or the idea of what we're going to accomplish, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to quit. Now, if you're in high school, like my students, you got no choice. You can't go anywhere. But if I signed up at USC, which I did, and I said, hey, I want to get my degree and my master's, and they said, sure, just keep showing up, they would not have gotten my money. I would have quit, I would have left. So everything they're saying is true, and this might be where I got that analogy or that illustration many years ago. So I love it, I love it, I love it. If you didn't know what was expected of you, you would never survive school. And so why not do the same thing in jiu-jitsu? Makes sense, unless your goal is to be the toughest of the tough, the strongest of the strong, the most gladiatorial warrior badass on the planet, okay? And maybe that's what people that keep showing up university want to be. I know a lot of competition schools, they only care about winning competitions. Okay, if that's your goal, then endure. Take your 2 or 3 moves that you're confident in and see if you can outlast the other guy. And when you're done, you get your $5 trinket, your little $5 medal, and you go, yay, I'm a warrior. But do you really know jiu-jitsu? Going back to what I talked about with Ben yesterday, when I did the video of 0 to blue belt at Gracie U versus keep showing up you, I think eventually the educated person, the person with a more solid base, the person with a bigger or better understanding of jiu-jitsu with a systematic approach is eventually going to overtake the badass, in my opinion. I mean, we got to take out of the equation athleticism, size, flexibility, blah, 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 age, right? There are a lot of variables, but all things being equal, I think the guy who goes to Keep Showing Up University, who just endures and outlasts, will not be as skilled as the person who goes to Gracie University and has a strong foundation and builds from there. Now, some people have said the master cycle is hard and it doesn't make sense because there's like 256 techniques you got to learn and all the different videos. I don't know, but I would rather focus on 256 techniques and know what's expected of me than keep showing up and try to endure and outlast. But 7:31, hit and play one more time. Oop, hit the microphone. All right, I'm at 9:59. I just paused it. They talked about the changes they made to the curriculum. By now, you are familiar with the Gracie Combatives curriculum, 36 techniques, yada, yada, yada. And of course, they got results and they had more people sign up and more people show up. And of course, with the way that they teach it and the way they break it all down, they said that they don't even have to teach the class. They can have someone else teach the class. So yay. Structure. Okay, now I've already beaten that drum on this channel, how much I love structure and how much I love a plan. So we're on the same page, guys. 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Now they're about to start talking about sparring. Let's go. All right, I'm at 11:26. They just got done talking about sparring and how if you take a guy who's got 1 month in and 3 months in, you put them against each other, they're worried about embarrassment. They're worried about looking good in front of their instructor and their peers, so they just go hard. They go aggro, as Rener said. And that's fine. I've said that before, but I agree. zero or very little experience, you're not going to go with skill. Let's take jiu-jitsu out of the equation. If I take a taekwondo student with 1 month experience versus a taekwondo student with 3 months experience, that fight's going to look like crap. It's going to look terrible. And they're going to stick to the rules, the parameters probably, because they're not necessarily afraid of getting hurt. But I think once you have somebody on top of you and it's affecting your breathing, it's affecting your movement, you start to spaz a little bit. Everybody's heard about the spazzy white belt. Well, the spazzy white belt is someone who has low skill put into an environment that requires high skill. And when you realize that you don't have what it takes to thrive in that environment, that's where the spaz comes from. So I 100% agree with the guys on that taking these guys and putting them in, like, celebrity death match, let's get it on. And they're fighting and they want to impress and they want to look good and they want to stripe or whatever. And they're trying to prove that they're gladiators. It's a recipe for disaster. And so taking that off the table makes sense, because here's a criticism, if you will. If you ever watch some of the crazy stuff that happens in jiu-jitsu tournaments, when somebody slaps someone, or there's a conflict, there's a fight, there's a battle. Even wrestling, collegiate wrestling, high school wrestling, when there's a problem, there's an incident in the match where the two people, two guys, two gals, whatever, a parent gets involved, they never wrestle. They never do jiu-jitsu. When there's a conflict and the people start jawing at each other and then people start fighting, they're not fighting with jiu-jitsu. They start throwing punches. They start throwing hands, because now the skill has gone out of the equation, and now it's strictly emotion. And emotion says this, whatever. I mean, if you took somebody who had never seen boxing, kickboxing, martial arts before and told them they had to fight, they're going to put their hands up, because that's our natural reaction, is to cover our face, cover our eyes, mouth, nose. This is how we survive. And so the natural reaction is this, right? If you ever listen to Tony Blauer has a system called the SPEAR system. I've never taken his classes. I did pay for one of his videos on fear management, because I think that's really important. But Tony talks about the startle flinch response. How no matter what happens, if you look at a crime, a car accident, the people's hands and forearms are scraped up. If you look at a fight, someone attacks someone with a knife, they have defensive wounds on their hands. Even untrained people kind of naturally do this, because they know they want to protect their moneymaker, their thing that helps them get laid, okay? To survive and to be fruitful and multiply, and it helps them breathe and eat and see and survive. This is our survival mechanism. Of course, you have your internal organs too, but we mostly protect this thing, our brain, the command center, right? The bridge of the Starship Enterprise. We want to protect this. And so if you see a jiu-jitsu disagreement break out, it becomes this and this before it gets to chokes and arm bars and ankle locks and all that stuff. So I think they're exactly right, because physiologically, at least in my opinion and Tony Blauer's opinion, and based on a lot of evidence, people resort to emotional response, not to trained response. Your emotional response is first, and then before you get to I'm going to berimbolo this guy to a heel hook, right? Whatever. So agree with that. If we take the emotion out of it, if we take the fear and the embarrassment out of the equation, we should have a higher level of productivity, a better chance of learning. I mean, even the things they're talking about right now are things I do in my class. For example, in my classroom, to keep from calling on people like, hey, Timmy, what's the answer for number 4? Hey, Susie, what's the answer for number 5? I don't call on people like that. We call that cold calling. I don't call on people like that. What I have is a system where I use 3x5 cards. Students fill out the 3x5 cards on the first day of school, and I call on students in a randomized order based on the cards. Everyone in the class knows that I go by the cards. And so if your card comes up next, it's not that I'm picking on you. It's not that I'm putting you on the spot. It just happened to be your turn. And so I do that because I don't want anyone to feel picked on. I don't want anyone to be the teacher's pet. Oh, you always call on, Jonathan. He always gets it right. No. Jonathan gets one shot at this thing based on the cards. And so when you take the fear and the embarrassment out of the equation and make it systematic, it promotes a better learning environment, because nobody feels picked on, nobody feels put on the spot, nobody feels embarrassed, and nobody gets to be the teacher's pet. So I agree with everything they're saying, and I love it. And now at 11 minutes and looks like 26 seconds, they're going to talk to some guy named Yuri, and he's going to talk about his experience, which probably sounds a lot like my experience that I talked about yesterday with my man Ben, aka Richter IAG. Let's see what Yuri has to say. I'm at 17:06, and Rener and Ryron are talking about reflex development and how it gives you skills and helps you develop the reflexes and gives you the stress and the indicators to be able to defend yourself on the street. And I agree with this, and I disagree with it. I agree with it if provided that the person that is the bad guy and the environment allows you to go hard. When I say hard, I don't mean punching somebody in the face and breaking somebody's nose and knocking somebody's teeth out. It's not that kind of party. I actually really liked what happened to me the other night at my old at Gracie Laguna Hills, where Joe, who was the instructor that night, let me do the reflex development class, and we ratcheted up the intensity by 10% every time we went through our reflex development sequence. That was an amazing adjustment twist. I don't know if that's what everybody does, but I think that's what everybody should do, because if I'm working with somebody who's brand new, never been in a fight, doesn't like punches being thrown at them, I've got to go super slow-mo. I got to show them, here comes the right hand, wham, right? And then they can duck it and do their, haymaker escape, whatever. But if I'm going with somebody who's a seasoned veteran, and I go, wait, I can swing it just a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, and not even give them so much telegraph. Hey, buddy, here it comes. I can just kind of, boom, throw it, It's really what it boils down to is know your opponent, know your training partner, know your friends, know your students. If you have a knowledge of, hey, that's Susie, and Susie, has never been in a fight before, but her husband was abusive, and now she's, she doesn't like people raising their voice at her, or she doesn't like people lifting their hands to her. You're going to have to be very careful with Susie. But that's Bob, and Bob's a Golden Gloves boxer. Golden Gloves boxer, and I can throw hands with Bob. He's just going to slip and move and roll and duck and whatever, and he's going to be fine. You just got to know your people. So yes, I think reflex development is a wonderful substitute for free sparring as a white belt. However, I think the reflex development has to be intentional. It has to be intense. I'll say educated, intentional, and intense. You have to know who you're dealing with, know what their limits are, what their capabilities are, what their fears are, what their concerns are. It has to be intense, and it has to be intentional. You can't just be like, okay, here it comes. Here we go. Hey, what you doing for dinner after this? I don't know. Let's go to Chili's, right? To me, that's cool. That's fine. But that's not what I want. I'm there to fight. I'm there to get better. I want to get better at this jiu-jitsu thing. So I should train with people like Bob, Joe, whatever, whomever I said, that we can kind of get a little more intense. But if I'm not ready for that, my instructor needs to know that and needs to pair me up accordingly. Or I have to take responsibility and ownership for my own thing and pair up with someone in my range and my vibe accordingly. So know yourself, know your training partners, know your instructor, know your limits. But reflex development is cool. 1706. I'm at 2256. We just had a little bit with Horion talking about what it means to be a good bad guy and how they learned that from his father, from Elio Gracie. And being a good bad guy is the most important part of learning jiu-jitsu and making sure that everyone's on the same playing field, which is kind of what I think I just said. So yeah, we're all in agreement, right? Horion, Henner, me, whatever, like little old me, right? The intention and the awareness, the intensity, the execution, and the knowledge of the bad guy is what makes reflex development work. Otherwise, it's just WWE. Or it's three-step sparring. All my traditional martial arts guys, karate guys, taekwondo guys, remember three-step sparring? High block, reverse punch, roundhouse kick, right? Ha-ya, right? That's cool. You did that. You're putting moves together. You're chaining it together. But three-step sparring always sucked until you sped it up a little bit, until you got a little faster, a little bit more intense. And that was... You could speed it up if you're with somebody good or somebody who had experience or somebody who you knew and who you trusted, right? And so, I mean, it's not kata, it's not, forms. In Taekwondo, we call it pumse. It's not pumse, it's not forms, but you are kind of getting that muscle memory by going through these motions. But the question is it really creating those links in your mind and your head, those reflexes? Because... I mean, that's the question of the intensity, in my opinion, and the quality of the bad guy is what develops those reflexes. So I was not sure how I felt about reflex development. I am super glad I got to do it. I think it was last week because it showed me what was possible and made me more of a believer. And so, yeah, reflex development, great. So no sparring, don't get hurt, no crazy aggro business. Reflex development still helps you develop those reflexes without developing the fear or that us versus them mentality or that embarrassment factor or that pride factor. So yes, I'm a fan. And now we're at 2257 and they're going to talk about the blue belt test, which I wonder if it changed since this video was recorded 9 years ago. I'm pretty sure Hickson and I think Pedro Sauer had something to do with that and made it more of a combatives belt. So I wonder if this is pre-combatives or post-combatives, but we will find out right about now. All right, we're at 2407. I just went down a rabbit hole when you mentioned Boyd belts and checking that out. That was cool. But more importantly, I think what they said about once you get to the point where you're going jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, you start to forget the self-defense techniques and you focus on what's going to help you win the fight or the battle or the roll between you and the other guy. So once you go jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, it becomes that whose jiu-jitsu is better, right? So you think your kung fu is pretty good, huh? Right? My kung fu is the best, right? And that's true, because even at my school, Keep Showing Up University, we worked on self-defense pretty much for the first like 20 minutes of class. Then we get to the jiu-jitsu stuff. Nobody cared about the self-defense stuff. And like I said, when we had our little misunderstanding earlier last year and I ended up leaving, they wanted to test me on my self-defense knowledge. And I was like, we haven't done a lot of this stuff in like a year. Because once we got to a certain point, it became what did or did not work in the role. Let's talk about that. Let's work on that versus let's focus on what's going to happen out in the streets. I really liked what Henner just said. And maybe this is a John Boyd quote where he says, you don't, not what you expect, but what you inspect. That's pretty good. So inspect the things you want them to retain and what you want them to learn. I like that phrase. So John Boyd, good for you. Uncle John, it said on that video I just watched. But also, if you want to make sure that your students can protect themselves in a street fight, it makes perfect sense you would test them on street fight stuff. It makes sense to me. I mean, think about it. If I have Gracie University and people are showing up and they want to learn how to fight, I am an a-hole. I'm an irresponsible, money-grubbing a-hole if I send them out in the world and they can't defend themselves. If you can do a berimbolo and invert and do a heel hook and a yada-yada, buggy choke, whatever the hell, but you can't defend a punch, I have failed you. And any instructor I saw this at Keep Showing Up University where I saw a purple belt come in one time visiting and we did the self-defense stuff at the beginning of class and he had no idea what he was doing. And I'm like, how'd you get a purple belt? But he got a purple belt because he knew how to berimbolo, right? And so I'm like, I keep picking on berimbolo. Nothing against that, right? Spider guard, I don't know, whatever. X guard, single leg X, whatever. Yeah, so I agree. Once again, I'm a fan. Let's keep it going. We're at 2407. We're at 2542. I absolutely positively hate the idea of the technical blue belt. I'm glad they got away from that, because to say you're a blue belt and you've never rolled seems criminal. And to say you're a blue belt, technically speaking, feels really weird. Like, you can show me all the moves, but we don't know if you can fight, but we're going to give you this belt. We're going to embroider technical on it. Technical? I am so glad they got away from this, because that is cringeworthy. I guess that's the best thing they had or they came up with, but the combatives belt is so much better, and I'm glad they did it. So let's see what they say next. I'm at 3333, and they're talking about how they gave promotions and the idea of promoting someone to their technical blue belt, and it's not about being the toughest or enduring or outlasting, but about having skill in the things they consider to be the most important, and you can't fault that. One thing I did appreciate is how Henner just said, we know that our technical blue belts are going to get rolled up when they go jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, but that wasn't our focus. And that is wonderful, because there are some people out there who only want self-defense. There are some people out there who don't really care about jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, or maybe they don't initially, and once they get there and they fall in love with jiu-jitsu, they want to play the game, right? Of me versus you, jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, let's see who's better. But most of the people walking the planet right now aren't thinking, I want to be world champion of jiu-jitsu. Most of the people walking the planet right now might want a hobby, they might want to lose weight, and they definitely want to protect themselves, which is one reason why I'm at Gracie University, is because I know for a fact that with the people I've trained, people I've worked with, move differently in the world when they feel like they know how to protect themselves. They interact differently. Their job performance improves, or their school performance improves. They're not constantly in fear or in danger of the world. Like, most of the time when people are crazy, or act crazy, or lash out, or, whatever, it's fear-based. And I mentioned Tony Blauer earlier. If you watch his stuff, if you feel like you're capable of handling the fear-inducing thing, the fear response is lessened, minimized. It doesn't go away, but it becomes more manageable, because I've been here before, I felt this before, and I survived it. So now I can kind of I feel like I can use that fear. It's that whole thing, and I don't want to talk about Tony Blauer because it's not his video and I'm not paid, but that fear response, he says, use that response to get you to the next step. Okay, your natural response then leads into your trained response. You've heard that phrase, right? Like, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training, right? So when the thing happens, I probably butchered that, but when the thing that's causing your fear happens, if you have a foundation and some training where you can say, I've been here before, like we just saw the video that they showed about the young man working at the internet cafe. He said he felt like he was just drilling. I've done this before. This isn't new. This isn't scary. I take this guy down. I go to side control. I hold him here until the cops show up. Like, it becomes, a reflex. Like, in all seriousness, I was kind of surprised at myself when I hadn't done Taekwondo for like 10 years. And I end up signing up my kids for Taekwondo. They're like, hey, why don't you get on the mats? And I'm like, all right. Wham. It's all still there. And when people throw punches and kicks, it's not scary because I've seen it all before. And so, in the same regard, I think if you go through the Gracie Combatives program, you do all these classes 3-4 times, you're able to pass the test, you should feel confident that if somebody swings at you, you can take them down and hold them, or take them down, choke them, or break something, right? Whatever it is. So I'm a fan. We're at 33-33. I feel like we're in the home stretch. Let's see what they say next. 35-43. They're saying something kind of like what I said yesterday on the previous video for my man Richter IAG, aka Ben. The intensity spike, boom, you learn a lot right off the bat, or you learn the stress inoculation, whatever you want to call it, but your actual knowledge kind of tapers off, kind of plateaus, versus the Gracie model where it's a little more gradual. Yeah, I see that. And one thing he just said that I really liked is the blue belt. What does the blue belt mean? The blue belt means whatever your instructor makes it mean. And that is some true stuff. No matter what, this is still a game of people. This is still a game of teachers and qualities and values and approaches. And so no matter how great someone's resume is, no matter how many shiny $5 medals they have hanging up in their studio, no matter how many world championships and ADCCs and blah, 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 they are still people. You ever go to McDojo Life's page? Yeah, there are a lot of craptastic people out there doing craptastic stuff. I'm not saying that's common, but it does happen. And what makes me wonder is like, okay, what does your instructor value? Where is your instructor putting the emphasis? Where is he placing his trust? And that is a really cool line. Like, what does the blue belt mean to you? It means whatever your instructor makes it mean. And that is some real talk. So, of course, if you're a Gracie University guy, you share the philosophy and the beliefs and the approach of Gracie University. And dang it, it looks like it works. But if you feel like you know better, you can go out there and do Chris's Jiu-Jitsu and roll the dice and see how it works out for you. But I can tell you firsthand from Keep Showing Up University and from UFC Gym where I went, people are like, I don't know what to do. What's the plan? What's the priority? What's the structure? And it's like, I'm at 37-10. And then Hiron's example, 42-year-old guy, used to do sports, maybe has an injury, wants to stay in shape, wants to be mentally stimulated, physically stimulated. That sounds like me. I think I was 42 when I signed up at Keep Showing Up University. And of course you get thrown to the wolves, and if you survive, great. But after you fall off, you're like, hey, this ain't for me. Apparently it's a young man's game. You see all these videos on Jiu-Jitsu after 40, Jiu-Jitsu after 50, and they talk about how to deal with the young lions in the dojo, right? The young guys on the mat. I never really had that problem. Most of the guys that I trained with to Keep Showing Up University were a little bit older. They were older professionals, which is cool. I said yesterday in that video, like money is a factor, who we attract. They all had money. We had doctors, lawyers, engineers that Keep Showing Up University. It's cool. So we were successful older guys who didn't want to hurt each other or break each other. But it was intense. And if you didn't learn, which I wasn't learning, I didn't feel good about what I was learning. I mean, I learned some things. I won't say I didn't learn anything. I did learn some things, but I didn't feel like I had a plan, and I didn't know how I was being graded. I didn't know what was going to lead to more success, yada, yada, yada. And so, yeah, I was that guy. Because after 3 years, almost 3 years, I was like, yeah, this ain't for me. At least not this way. And the really freaking sad part, y'all, the really sad part, as I posted about a couple days ago, I looked into Gracie University back in 2020. I actually went and watched a class back in 2020. I bought a gi back in 2020, and instead I went for the old tough guy approach. I wanted to feel like a warrior badass and learn from the Grand Poobah, Master Bob, and in the process, I set back my progress 3 or 4 years. And I did learn some things, and those things hopefully will serve me well as I continue my jiu-jitsu journey, but that wasn't the place that I think was best for me. And I'm kind of disappointed that I went the Marine Corps route instead of the Air Force route, if you watched my video yesterday. But yeah, it sounds like Hiron and Hen are describing me. So let's continue. We're at 37. All right, just finished the video, Ben. Richter IAG, I finished the video. And again, like I said, I've seen it before and it was cool and I enjoyed it. But Yeah, it's funny because he was just talking about being the hammer and not being the nail. I never heard that. I don't remember hearing that until I was talking to Travis from Elbows Tight, and I thought, yeah, that's a great way of putting it. So I agree with everything they said. I feel like I've kind of said this stuff before. So thank you, Ben, Richter IAG, for requesting this reaction video. I feel like pretty much everything I put out so far kind of ties into that video. My experience at Keep Showing Up University versus my experience at Gracie University kind of just compares and contrasts the experience of going to a Gracie University school and going to a Keep Showing Up University. And again, we sometimes want to fancy ourselves as the hero of the story. We want to be the Marine. We want to be the badass. We want to be the gladiator. But the reality is not all of us are that person. And or we're not that person yet. Maybe you are going to be that person down the road, but you have to feel confident in what you've learned so far to get there. Maybe you need a clear path to know exactly what's expected of you, kind of like I did. Maybe that's what you need. So I'm not going to lie to you. I've said it a billion times. Sometimes I miss rolling. Sometimes I don't feel like a warrior at Gracie University. Sometimes I feel like I'm just kind of going through the motions. But when I go to class and I go through those motions, I learn details and I learn things that are important to me that help me get better, which is why it's worth it to me. And so maybe if you're a 21-year-old, wrestler who wants to be in the UFC, this ain't for you. But if you're an older individual with some life experience and you have something to lose, or maybe you just learn differently than most people and you need a linear progression and you need a step-by-step kind of a spelling out of your process, kind of like I did, then this is the thing for you. So thank you, Ben Richter IAG, for giving me this video to watch. I've seen it before, but it's always worth watching again. And the next video they suggested is, it looks like it's sport jiu-jitsu in a street fight. This might be, I don't know if it is. I'm going to watch the Hickson video, the Hickson Pedro Sauer video, where they talk about the combatives belt. I'm just curious what that looks like now that I'm in the Gracie Breakdown loop. And of course, I got the day off. I got nothing else to do. So if you liked this video, if you watched it all the way to the end, give me a hammer emoji. Like you're not the hammer, or you want to be the hammer, or hopefully you're not the nail. All right. Give me a hammer emoji so I know you watched all the way to the end. If you have any questions, let me know. You can send me a comment, question, feedback in the comments, of course, or you can hit me up on Instagram, TikTok at Chris Learns Jiu-Jitsu. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.